Welcome to Between Two Psychs, a podcast where two psychologists and board-approved supervisors deep dive into many of the questions and challenges that provisional psychologists and early career therapists face. Your hosts, Isabelle Tombleson and Claire Trevitt, talk about a range of topics, specifically relating to psychologists and therapists who are just starting out.
Good morning, Claire.
Good morning.
We are back. We're back. We're going to be talking about Competency 3 today from the new Psychology Board Competencies, the advanced copy that's been released. Let's get to it.
Yeah, so Competency 3 is exercises professional reflexivity, purposeful and deliberate practice, and self-care. So there's a lot in there. And this essentially is a very new competency. It doesn't overlap with any of the competencies that we've been working with currently. And I'm really quite excited about this one because I think there's some really, really important information in there.
We are both so excited about this one. I think we've been aware for a long time that self-care is definitely a term that's thrown around and people say it a lot, but having it in the competencies makes it a serious affair. This is something we need to take note of now as professionals. So I'm very excited about it.
Yes, absolutely. And also what self-care actually is, because we all have our sort of different sense of what that really means. And I think it would be good to unpack that a little bit too.
Yeah, so let's unpack it. So professional reflexivity, purposeful and deliberate practice and self-care. Let's just maybe first go with the reflexivity side of things. And I think you and I have had a discussion around what is the difference between being reflexive and reflective.
Yes, and we did actually touch on that in a previous episode when we started to introduce these new competencies.
But if anyone missed that, I think you and I, like through our research, we've kind of worked out that, they can be very, very similar terms, but let's just reinforce for everyone, what does it actually mean to be reflexive in our practice?
Yes, so to be reflective, which is what many of us are doing, I think all of us are doing on a very regular basis, is something that we're very familiar with. It's often around thinking about what we have done in the past and considering the impact of that and what we may do differently or what may have gone well, but it's really a process of reviewing past information.
That's right. That's right. This is the past tense. We're going away after being in the moment with our consumers and we're thinking about what we've done and what we might like to do differently. But Claire, what is being reflexive all about?
Yes, so there are two components to being reflexive. The first is it happens more in the present moment. So it's more around noticing what's happening and having a sort of conscious in the moment awareness of what might be happening. So of course we're catching it sooner, we may be able to address it sooner. That will probably depend on the situation. Sometimes we may be reflexive and we may hold that information until we are able to sort of unpack it a little bit more later on. Sometimes we may address it there and then. And the other component about being reflexive, which I really love, is around looking at ourselves in the process. So thinking about who we are and how that shapes our interactions and our behaviors. Because we come with sets of values, we come with a different identity, we come with cultural backgrounds, we come with many assumptions or biases, and all of this is going to influence our perceptions and our actions, and it's going to be different for each of us depending on our own unique background and our own unique experience.
Thank you so much for explaining that. I'm really excited to be here to be able to share and reinforce these definitions with everyone, because I know as we're starting to digest the new competencies, getting our heads around these definitions can take a little bit of time. And so a little bit of repetition doesn't hurt here, I think. And I do really like how the word reflexivity has been included in the title of this competency, because as I read through each of the different points that fall under the competency, being reflexive really is what this is all about. So when it talks about 3.2, recognizes the limits of own competence and refers on to other practitioners. 3.3, critically evaluates the effectiveness of own professional practice and strengths and weaknesses, including regularly self-assessing against the professional competencies. So this is all about us being tuned in to ourselves and being aware of ourselves, making decisions to best suit the client with consideration for how we might be affecting or influencing our practice or the process.
Yeah, and I really love this because I agree. I find it really exciting because so much of this work focuses obviously on the client and the work that we're doing to support the client in front of us. However, we are part of this relationship, and it's so important that we bring ourselves into this too, because we come with all of this as well. And of course, then that begins to interact, and that's going to have an impact.
Yeah. Do you know, well, as we were getting ready for this episode, I actually did a little bit of a research. Why is it that psychologists are one of the only health professions that are mandated to engage in supervision annually? The only other health profession in Australia that's mandated to engage in supervision are social workers who are with the, I think it's AAHW. I'm not sure what that stands for, but that's some special social work accreditation process, I think. It's interesting to realize that, isn't it, Claire, that we're the only profession, health profession in Australia that are mandated to do supervision.
Mm.
It's big, and when I read about it, it's because of that exact thing you just said. Because in order for us to perform this work, it's incredibly personal and it comes with, and we do influence the process remarkably. We're also in these extraordinary positions of power where people who are vulnerable are coming to us because of those components that were required to engage in supervision. And there's probably a couple of other points that I've missed as well, but I'll have a quick look. But share your thoughts, Claire. What's your like understanding? Did you ever realize that as well, that we're the only ones?
No, I think that obviously we know that psychotherapists and counselors and the sort of the mental health profession does engage in supervision. But I think, yeah, in terms of looking at the other health professionals, no, I hadn't really considered that. That's such an important
GPs.
point.
Yeah, I was talking to my friend who's a GP a couple of months ago, talking about how I'm supervising and stuff. I'm like, do you get supervision? And he's like, no, we didn't get supervision. I'm like, how do you function without supervision? I would just
Mm.
feel so overwhelmed if I didn't have that special place for me as an individual to just express what it's like to do what we do.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, it's absolutely what I would consider a part of my own self-care is accessing supervision. I mean, I definitely put that under the self-care category. And I think that when we look at supervision, we think about, well, we need to do these 10 hours of peer consultation or supervision per year. That is an absolute minimum. And at different stages in our career and different stages of learning, we may need to draw on that more frequently. And so, yeah, I think it's a vital component of this work. But yeah, it's so interesting when you think about other health professionals not having that same level of support.
Yeah, so like physiotherapists, GPs, specialists and specialist medical practitioners. There was some like, yeah, a bunch of other ones as well. Yeah, no one's required. I'm sure people are doing it, but no one's required. I do think, like obviously, as we've mentioned, the nature of our work is the reason why we are mandated to engage in supervision. Actually, I remember as well, and one of the other points of research I found was it was because I think in the past the psychology profession may have become under scrutiny because of perhaps the behavior of some psychologists in the profession a very long time ago. And there was something about the psychology board saying, well, all psychologists are mandated to engage in supervision, and that gives credibility, I guess, and protects the public as well by us needing to engage in this practice.
Mhm.
I'm sorry to focus so much on supervision for this point of the discussion, but I just thought it was a really interesting little bit of information to share and just reflect on together.
Well, I actually think it's a really important thing to raise and to emphasize. So I'm actually really pleased that you're raising this, because when we look at the new code of conduct, there is such an emphasis on consultation in that
Mm.
code. And so much of our decision making needs to be around our own processes, as in our own reflection, our own reflexivity, and also consulting with peers. And there are many sections of the code where it's actually kind of a directive almost that it needs to be discussed with a peer, and then the decision needs to be documented. And so it focuses very, very heavily. And I am wondering about the minimum of 10 sessions or 10 hours per year, and whether or not that's going to be sufficient for many of us, given these new competencies and this new code of conduct that we are to adhere to. Because you're right, it is so important. I mean, it's mandated for a reason, but there's so much to cover in
Mm.
time, because we're to be reflecting, we're to be also thinking about our own impacts of that reflexivity, and also looking at the practical elements of our work too.
And developing our skills. Look, I think you're right, but when I think about like my own supervision log, I do engage in a lot of group supervision with other psychologists and other health professionals who are therapists. And I would probably have like double, triple, quadruple the amount of supervision hours that I log if I was able to log those supervision hours where I'm listening to other professionals speak about their experiences. Because I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, we're only allowed to count hours of supervision for the time that we've discussed our cases, our own cases. Is that right?
As supervision, but if we're listening to somebody else, that can be counted as
CPD.
personal development. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But like I just thought I'd sort of like share that thought. I really enjoy the process of sitting and listening to others, because as I'm listening to others talk about their cases, I'm reflecting on my own practice constantly and thinking about how that applies to me, or how I might adapt, even though I'm not outwardly speaking it as they're presenting their case. I just thought I'd share that, just in terms of like the mandatory minimum hours.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I am actually part of a supervision group that I've joined quite recently, and it's been lovely. It really been great to hear other people's experiences, and I'm really learning from that too. That's just as valuable at times as presenting my own questions and my own cases.
Yeah, yeah. But it'll be interesting to see if that changes at any point, if the board decides that we need to, have more supervision hours per year, and and how people will respond to that. It will be interesting. But there's a few more points and for competency 3 that we want to cover today. I think self-care is a big one.
Yes, we need to take care of ourselves in order to support others. And we need to ensure that our own well-being and level of psychological functioning is optimal for the work that we're doing. And so it is a responsibility that we carry to look after ourselves and to think about the impact of our own well-being on the work that we're doing. And so when we think about self-care, we often think about, taking a day off, or getting a massage, or, doing some meditation, or going for a run, and this whole list of practical things and these things are really important and incredibly valuable. But I think there's another layer of self-care, which is around really attending to those deeper needs in relation to the work. Like, so what is our capacity?
Oh,
What
yeah.
is sustainable for us individually? Because you may have a colleague that sees 8 clients in a day, but you may be struggling to maintain 6. And that's I think that's self-care, is really determining what's your capacity and what is going to be manageable and sustainable in the long term.
I agree. Do you know, I had a supervisor once tell me that there was some research that said that there's a large portion of psychologists, I don't know what percent, that by our 7th year of practice, there's a portion of us who are dropping out of the profession because of this exact issue. And I think the reason why she was sharing that with me was because she wanted to forewarn me about the importance of self-care. Now, since that conversation, I've since had other people, other supervisors tell me that that's not accurate, and that psychology profession is one of the most rewarding and long-lasting professions that people stay in for a very long time. So I don't know what's right. I haven't looked at the latest research, but I do think it's important to talk about self-care. It is absolutely not just about doing nice things for ourselves and switching off when we're not seeing our clients. Because of the nature of what we do, it's intrinsically emotionally heavy work. It is heavy, heavy stuff, what we hold and what we hear. And I don't want to jump on my soapbox too hard, but I do feel like sometimes when we are working for organizations, when we're not in control of our workloads and our practice, there is just an absolute lack of understanding from organizational managers and people who are in control of budgets and KPIs of just how taxing it can be, and a total lack of appreciation for how we as individuals need to have some autonomy about how many clients we do see a day and have some respect for that. Oh, that's an area that's really got me at the moment, Claire.
Mm. It's such a tricky balance, isn't it? Because, there are these organizational requirements versus the ethical requirements and professional requirements that we need to be delivering a service that is going to be optimal. And so therefore we need to be in that optimal state. And I think it's made really difficult by there aren't actually any clear guidelines around how many clients a day.
Well, the APS has something around 4 clients a day. I was pretty sure I read a while ago. I could be wrong with that. What
I
do you?
believe that they did, but I don't believe that that is the case anymore because I've struggled to find information. The closest sort of recommendation I could find was through the British Psychological Society that recommended 20 clients or
Mm,
20 client-facing hours for a full-time working week,
mm.
which would be 4 clients a
I
day,
see.
5 days a
We've-
week.
I'm remembering we've had this discussion in one of our previous episodes. Yes. I guess so. I guess the message that I want to send home with everyone today around self-care is that self-care isn't just about doing the nice things that have got nothing to do with being a psychologist, but it is about really like accepting and recognizing that what we do is hard and stressful, and it is okay. We need to give ourselves permission to have space for coming to terms with that and doing whatever it is that we need to do to cope with that. And that might mean, like, if you need to take a couple of weeks off or a couple of months off, do it. If you need to go and get some therapy for yourself just to have some space for yourself, please do that. And I will always be the first person to put my hand up and say that I have absolutely done that multiple times over the last 8 years of my career. I've had to take time out and I've had to go and get my own therapy. It's okay. We're also allowed to be vulnerable and need to put our hand up sometimes.
And I love the fact that you've raised that because I think as mental health professionals, psychologists are one of the few professions that are not required to have personal therapy as part of the training. And I always find that very interesting.
So interesting. Yes, like we've got to get supervision, but oh no, you don't need to go and work through your own stuff.
No, and I look at these new guidelines, and we are really, like I'm looking at 3.4, engages in reflection and reflexivity on the impact of one's own culture, values, beliefs, and biases. And
How do you do that if not in therapy?
yeah, I mean, I think that an element of self-reflection or journaling or work may create some of this or discussions with peers. But yes, I think to truly know ourselves, it can be difficult without the personal work. And as we're having this conversation, I'm also very aware of privilege and the finances that are required, and the time that is required to engage in some of these self-care activities because it's not always accessible to people, particularly if you're in an internship and you're paying for 2 hours of external supervision every week. That's going to eat into your budget in a significant way. And so, yeah, we're presenting some ideals here, but also I just want to recognize that it's not always accessible to everybody.
Thank you, Claire. It's such a good point. I think we're all under so much pressure when we want to be a psychologist to just focus on the specific goals that we need to attain, the certificates, the requirements that we need to meet, that we totally do. Just, yeah, we neglect ourselves.
Absolutely. And coming back to the self-care part, there was another part I think that's
Mm.
quite important that we haven't covered yet, that is around, and it does touch on being reflective and reflexive, and the type of work that energizes us versus the type of work that depletes us.
Oh, I love this. Yes.
And that's going to be different for all of us because I work in a trauma space, and when I tell people who are not psychologists that I work in trauma, a common response is, "Oh my gosh, I don't know how you do that. How do you listen to people talking about these things all of the time?" And yet, that's the type of work that I find very rewarding. To some extent, I do find it quite energizing and very satisfying. And there would be other work that I would find less satisfying and less energizing. And I think that it can sometimes take time to find our feet with this, but this is also, I think, part of our self-care is working out what it is that is going to work best for us, and also sometimes what combinations of work or
Mm.
when whether we need to space clients throughout the day and have like a 15 or 30-minute break in between sessions, or whether we do back to back and then take a longer period of time, whether we see more clients 3 days a week and then have 2 days of admin time. It's going to be different for different people, and working those things out, I think, can be also, it can take time, but it can also be, I think, a form of self-care in working in a way that fits us as individuals.
Mm. Mm. I thank you so much for sharing that. And that's that reflexivity, isn't it? Like knowing ourselves, being tuned into ourselves, and then also backing ourselves and making a decision to make our work situation fit in the best way possible for us. And so much love how you talk about finding finding that area that gives us joy and energizes us. I think that's so important as well. I think if you've studied for 6 years to get your registration and you think, gosh, like I just need to get a job so I can start earning some money. And so like if you're like me, that's exactly what I did. And I didn't like I wasn't fussy. I just took what I could get. And like I was so grateful for it. But you do end up, you need to change. You need to work out what it is that, really does interest you. And don't be afraid to change. Like so many people, I think there's this old mindset, that people need to stay in jobs for a certain period of time. Don't listen to any of that. And if you're in a job right now that isn't satisfying you, that doesn't give you joy and energizes you, or in a situation where the organization around you is demanding way too much of you, like if you're a registered psychologist, you can get work anywhere. Do not sacrifice yourself and your well-being because of people's perceptions or judgments or outdated ideas.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of choice that we have that we're not necessarily always aware of when we come into the profession. And also sometimes it's not what we think it's going to be. We discover, oh my gosh, I really like doing this. Oh, I thought I'd love doing this, and I really don't.
Mm. It's very diverse. Like there are so many different populations we can work with. There are different types of organizations we can work for. And you don't necessarily need to be a clinician on the front line either. Like you can become a team leader, or you can go into or into management. You could set up a practice. You could be a supervisor like Claire and I, and supervision could be your thing. I certainly know that's definitely become the thing that energizes me over the last couple of years. I love supervising. So yeah, but knowing yourself, taking time to like be present with yourself, maybe doing some journaling and things like that, like you suggested, Claire, could be a great start for getting in touch with what it is that you see yourself doing that makes this profession something that you do love and that you do stick to for a very long time.
And I think what you're describing here is this continuous evaluation of what is working for us, what is working for our clients. And that is really being reflective and reflexive. And so this is sort of weaving all of these together
Yeah.
I think that there are lots of ways that we are applying this principle broadly across our work. The only thing that we haven't mentioned here yet
Yeah.
is purposeful and deliberate practice.
Ooh, okay, let's touch on that before we finish.
Yes, and I really love this too because the purposeful and deliberate component here. I know that there are a number of tools that we can use in terms of ensuring that we are providing a service that is of value to clients. You know, there are various sort of, is it feedback informed treatment tools like the outcome rating scale and these sorts of things that we can use. Yeah, these tools can be really helpful in terms of us getting feedback on whether clients are receiving the service that they are expecting to receive and whether it's having value for them. But in terms of the professional development and the self-care, really thinking about what it is that we are wanting to learn and develop. And something that I really enjoy doing, which I think is purposeful and deliberate practice, is when I learn a new skill, I think, okay, I'm going to practice this one skill and I'm going to see how many times I can put this into place and I'm going to see what the impact is and I'm going to reflect on that because that's something that I want to develop. And I'm learning to do things at a more sort of micro level to develop skills as opposed to I've done this training, now I'm going to put it all into place and I feel like it gets muddy and I get a bit lost. So
Uh-huh.
sometimes really breaking things down into being able to determine what it is that you really want to focus on and being very deliberate about
Mm.
those things.
Thank you, Claire. That is such a nice way to finish this episode. And I think very, very practical and a message that we all need to hear, especially if we have a tendency to go and enroll in a bunch of different courses with different therapy modalities, and it can get very overwhelming. So that's a lovely way to end. Thank you so much.
That's no, I think it's thank you. I think it's a wonderful discussion to have. There's so much more we could say here, but I think that we need to leave it there for today.
We will. We will. All right, we'll see you all next time.
We will. Bye
Bye.
for now. Thank you for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave us a 5-star rating. It really helps others find the show. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Between Two Psychs for more updates and resources. For more information and to explore everything we offer, head over to our website, betweentwopsychs.com.au. We appreciate your support and we'll see you next time.